At the Battle of Winwade in 655, the great Mercian warrior king Penda was finally defeated by a Northumbrian army led by King Oswy. In the aftermath of the battle, Penda's once mighty kingdom collapsed, its vassal states quickly declaring independence, and its original territory split into two autonomous parts. The southern portion of the realm was allowed by the victorious Oswy to fall into the hands of Penda's son Bede, whereas the northern portion was to be directly ruled by the Northumbrian king himself, in a stark reversal of the recent Mercian supremacy over the north. Just 6 months after the arrangement began, Bede was dead, apparently murdered in treacherous circumstances, very possibly with involvement from Oswy, who now assumed control over the entirety of Mercia, very nearly stamping out its independence entirely, and forcing Christianity upon the mostly still pagan population. For 2 years between 656 and 658, Oswy ruled as the king of both Northumbria and Mercia, and further extended his influence into every other kingdom of the Anglo-Saxon Heptarchy. It was then, in 658, that hushed rumours began to spread throughout Mercia. Soon, talk of dissent blossomed into full-scale rebellion, when it was confirmed that Wulfhere, a son of Penda, was still alive, now fully grown into a man and supported by 3 of the most powerful Mercian lords, Imin, Eofor and Eadbert, who had kept him in hiding for the past 2 years, whilst they bided their time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In 658, whilst Oswy was preoccupied to the north of his realm in Pictland, they raised their banners. Under the figurehead of the heir to the throne, they went to war. Wulfhere had returned. At the time of Wulfhere's birth, in around 640, his native country of Mercia in the Midlands had been locked in a violent struggle with the neighbouring kingdom of Northumbria for many years, whereas Northumbria was a well-established power, having been led by 2 powerful Christian kings, Edwin and Oswald. Mercia was newer, being situated right on the wild frontier with the native Britons, and still mostly a pagan land. Wulfhere's father Penda was no exception. He was a warlord who had risen to power mostly through his own prowess in battle, and over a succession of spectacular victories, had not only assured his nation's independence from the north, but significantly expanded its borders on a permanent basis in the process, moulding his country from a fledgling realm still led by tribal sub-kings into a centralised powerhouse ruled by a single strong ruler. Having already killed the Northumbrian king Edwin in 632, Penda won another epic victory in 642 against his successor Oswald, and in doing so left the north a shadow of its former self. As a result of these 2 spectacular victories, Wulfhere had spent his childhood years in the court of a feared and respected warlord, and the greatest king in all of England. In 655, however, the unthinkable happened, and Penda was soundly defeated in open battle by the new Northumbrian king, Oswy, who had allegedly been heavily outnumbered at the time, yet triumphed nonetheless. He wasted no time in breaking the power of Mercia, and gradually set about not just making himself overlord, but incorporating the kingdom into his own realm in an attempt to stamp out its independence entirely. No details are known of Wulfhere's childhood besides the existence of 2 brothers, one older, Bede, and another younger, Ethelred, whilst it's likely that the eldest child, Bede, accompanied Penda on his fateful expedition north to do battle against Oswy in 655. It's unknown whether Wulfhere, then a young man of around 15, had accompanied his father. The campaign was a disaster, and despite allegedly travelling with 30 warlords, along with their respective warbands of veteran warriors, all hailing from all over Mercia and her adjacent territories, the Mercians were defeated, Penda killed and beheaded, and his lands torn into 2 parts. With no choice but to agree with the victorious king, Bede became king of just half of his father's kingdom. Wulfhere, on the other hand, went into hiding. After Bede's murder in 656, Oswy went further than any other king of his overlordship. Rather than simply force Mercia into submission and tribute, the Northumbrian king attempted to stamp out the existence of the monarchy entirely. Resentment was of course strong towards this policy, and plans hatched to thwart the northerners. As soon as enough time had passed, and Oswy taken north on campaign to his northern borders against Pictland, another state nominally subject to him at the time, the leaders of the rebellion made their move. The revolt was a success, and Wulfhere, now 18 years old and a young, energetic ruler, became the new king of Mercia. Oswy apparently relented around this time, and an uneasy truce was made between the 2 kingdoms. It's been suggested that Wulfhere agreed to adopt Christianity as part of the settlement, and possibly even agreed to look south rather than north to expand on a permanent basis. Thus it would be the southern kingdoms of Wessex, Sussex, Essex and Kent that would now take the full attention of the Mercian armies. Whilst his power ended at the Northumbrian border of the Humber, Wulfhere expanded his influence significantly to the south during his reign, bringing the kingdoms of Sussex, Essex and Kent under his overlordship through a combination of politics and military might. Wulfhere appears to have taken over Oswu's position in many instances, although Bede does not list him as one of the rulers who exercised imperium as a Bretwalder. Modern historians generally consider that the rise to primacy of the Kingdom of Mercia began in his reign. He seems to have been the effective overlord of Britain south of the Humber from the early 660s, though not overlord of Northumbria as his father had been. Military expeditions first brought some border areas of Wessex under his control in the early 660s, and his influence may have actually caused a level of internal instability which ushered in a period of disunity in Wessex into the 670s, with Bede mentioning that regional underkings wielded power during this time, rather than a single monarch. Wulfhere's marriage to Eärmenhild also brought his kingdom into close contact with the Christian kingdoms of Kent, and also the Merovingian Franks, which were connected by kinship and trade. The political and economic benefits of this marriage may therefore also have been a factor in Wulfhere's Christianisation of his kingdom, which continued throughout his reign. The next realm to feel Wulfhere's wrath was the Isle of Wight in 661, which was subsequently given to the South Saxons after its conquest. Ruled by Ethelwil, Wulfhere's godson and a client king to himself. After the conquest of the previously pagan Isle of Wight, Wulfhere ordered the priest Eopa to provide baptism to its inhabitants. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, this was the first time that Christian baptism had reached the island. Swithelm, the ruler of the East Saxons, died in 664, and he was succeeded by his two sons, Sighere and Sabi, brothers who Bede describes as rulers under Wulfhere, king of the Mercians. Mercia's influence over its eastern borders amongst the Lindisfarne, whose territory, Lindsey, lay in what is now Lincolnshire, is known from information about church authority. At least one of the Mercian bishops at Lichfield is known to have exercised authority there. Oswu's influence to the south of his realm had waned by this time, if not before, and Wulfhere likely had capitalised upon this, dominating the area. When Wulfhere finally looked northwards again in the 670s, this time to attack Oswu's son Egfrith in 674, he did so from a position of strength. Stephen of Ripon's Life of Wilfrid says that Wulfhere stirred up all of the southern nations against Northumbria. Bede does not report the fighting, nor is it mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, but according to Stephen, Egfrith managed to defeat Wulfhere, forcing him to surrender Lindsey and to pay tribute. Wulfhere is said to have survived the defeat, but evidently lost some degree of control over the south as a result. In 675, Esquine, one of the kings of the West Saxons, fought him at a place called Beardenheaft. It is not known where this battle was or who was the victor. Henry of Huntingdon, a 12th century historian who had access to versions of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles that are now lost, believed that the Mercians had been the victors in a terrible battle, and remarks upon Wulfhere having inherited the valour of his father and his grandfather, although Esquine was likely sufficiently successful to break Wulfhere's hold over Wessex. Wulfhere died later in 675. The cause of death, according to Henry of Huntingdon, was disease, possibly as the result of a lingering battle wound inflicted during his wars against Wessex. Ethelred, Wulfhere's brother, succeeded to the throne and reigned for another 30 years. Ethelred recovered Lindsey from the Northumbrians a few years later after his accession, but he was generally unable to maintain the domination of the south which had been achieved by Wulfhere. It would be under a slightly later king, Offa, between 757 and 796, that Mercia would reach the very apex of its power, dominating the entirety of the land now known as England.